Hey, church family. We're here to bring you our very first episode of the Life on Point podcast. My name is Zach. I'm the digital producer here, and with me today we got a couple of very interesting guys.
Well, he's interesting.
You're pretty interesting, Darren.
You can say that. Well, my name's Darren, since he said it, and I am the media pastor here at Connection Point Church, and this is...
I'm Michael, and I'm the young adults pastor here at Connection Point.
Yeah, so with that, we're basically going to talk about, like, sort of basically the young people in the church, and by that we mean basically 18 to 30, and we just kind of discuss that, and that's kind of the base of that age where people tend to drop off completely from church, and how there's this almost void in the basically Christendom, and that's basically our goal at CPC is to reach that group specifically, and that's why we got Michael, because Michael's, as he said, is basically our pastor over that, and he's also basically we're bringing in, or we have just over the last year, our 4-1, which is basically the ministry designed for that age group. So he's here to basically tell us the origins of 4-1 and just bring the general discussion about that whole age demographic and that kind of thing.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, I've been on staff since about this time last year. And a big part of the reason for that is because my wife Bethany and I, when we started coming to CPC just as members of the congregation, that was just something that we noticed there was a gap. When you walk into this church, it's an incredible church. It's a great church. I love being a part of this CPC church family. But you walk in and you kind of see there's this great kids ministry over here, right? And then you see all these things about the point, and we have this great student ministry, and we have wonderful, Sunday morning experiences for the rest of our congregation as well. But we noticed that there just didn't seem to be anything for that once you get out of the youth group age, because in my experience and other churches and other places that I've been involved in, there was this feeling sometimes when you come out of the youth group, you feel too young to just go straight into the Sunday morning service. You feel too nervous. You're like, what, if I don't have as many of my friends around and things like that. But then also you're too old, you feel, to hang out with the youth kids anymore. So you kind of just wind up in this weird midpoint where you don't really know what to do. And I've found that a lot of times, I don't know if you guys identify with this, but sometimes when you don't know what to do, you just don't do anything, right? Because you just kind of freeze. And so just kind of, as you were alluding to earlier, Zach, I think a lot of people kind of, for lack of a better way to put this, kind of fall off the path there because they just don't know what to do. And I think that's why we have a lot of people that will go off to college or whatever, and if they don't have a solid foundation, if they don't have a solid sense of who they are in Christ, they can get filled with all kinds of different ideas or whatever, and then all of a sudden they're as far away from God as they've ever been. And so we really saw that there was a bit of a gap there. There was nothing, after the student ministry that was for a specific age group. And so we really began to pray about that and see what can we do to help in that area. We got really involved with the student ministry as well on Wednesday nights. Me and my wife, we love the point so much, but we were really trying to figure out what can we do to kind of help bridge that gap. Little did we know, the church as a whole was trying to address that problem as well.
Yeah, I'll address that since I was a pastor at that point. I'm not the lead pastor, Pastor Chris and myself, and a lot of us had discussed ad nauseum a lot about that age group. We didn't really know what to do.
Yes.
And we had been praying for somebody to come along who could be the face of that. And lo and behold, the Lord brought us Michael. So you're a godsend, Michael.
Oh,
congratulations.
It's true. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So yeah, there was a huge point of emphasis for us as far as a desire to reach that age group, because we all know there's a major void there.
Yeah.
I wasn't raised in church, so I kind of skipped that whole age group. I didn't come into the faith till I was in my 30s. Zach, I think he started out in the church a little bit, fell out, came back when? In your 20s?
Yeah. Well, no, it was weird because I actually got saved at I think it was 24, but I didn't go to church for 2 or 3 years. So even that, it was 27 or so before I came back.
So everybody's life experiences are different when it comes, but by and large, there was some data points that came up that kind of emphasize the importance of that age group. And it was the Pew Research Center did a survey, and the survey is like 300,000 people, so it's not like it's some 200 people and they're going to come up.
Pew is legit.
Yeah.
So this was the data they came out with. I literally sent this to Chris the first time I saw it, and Pastor Chris, he's our lead pastor here at Connection Point Church, and it's shocking, is what it is. Currently, right now, 31% of children raised as Christians, that is defined as attend a weekly service, become unaffiliated, in other words, fall away from the faith, between 16 and 19. 31% of them who are raised in a church fall away completely from Christianity. Of those raised unaffiliated, like me, become Christians between 16 to 29. So 21% become Christians between that ages of 18 and 30, where 31% of those raised in church fall away. Here's the scary part. For net loss that will result in an America that is less than 30% Christian by the year 2070. And so here in the next 35 years or so, 40 years, this country will be largely non-Christian. And so, and that should shock people or should worry people a little bit, because we're failing somewhere. That's what that tells me. We're dropping the ball somewhere. Yeah. And so that's why your ministry is so important to us. And we believe it's so important to the what we're trying to do here and just in general, the kingdom of God, trying to reach a group of people that is, for only word I can use is forgotten. They seem to have been forgotten. Because I really think the reason churches struggle with that age group because we don't know what to do with them. Because most pastors are usually in their 50s, right? Mm-hmm. Lead pastors are, so they really aren't connected to that age group very well. And then they have a children's pastor, right? And then they have the youth pastor, who's usually the age of the person that you're trying to reach. And it seems to be just where it's been stuck for decades. But anyways.
Yeah, and I think that this is probably true in a lot of areas of life, but especially as a young adult, they are looking for community so much.
Oh yeah.
They are looking for a place where they feel like they belong. They're looking for a place where they feel like they're accepted. And I think that more often than not, and I'm just going to be completely blunt and honest here, more often than not, for probably a litany of different reasons, young people tend to shy away from church because they feel judged.
Oh, yeah.
Because they feel like there are so many different viewpoints on how church should look. And there's a lot of different traditions and there's a lot of different things that people hold very dear as it pertains to church. And so a lot of times I will see young people who don't feel like they fit that mold, who don't feel like they fit those standards, so to speak. And they feel like when they walk into a church, everyone is just staring at them, judging them for how they dress, how they talk, how they look at the world, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we need to just accept every single viewpoint that every person has, let alone every young adult. I'm not saying that the goal shouldn't be to help them strive to be better, to be closer to Jesus, to grow into the person that God has called them to be. But sometimes I think that judgment that they feel in that moment can deter them so quickly from being able to receive what Jesus has for them in that moment. And we as the church, we got to be careful.
Oh yeah.
We got to be careful with how we treat, especially that age group, but any new person coming in, because sometimes they're not going to look like us, act like us, dress like us, in that regard. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So if we are so caught up in what we think a person should be wearing or what we think you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That can really be detrimental to building the proper relationship with them.
And this is going to seem pointed, but it's not. I just looked across the table and you talked about clothes and I looked at your hat and I know there's a whole generation of people that wearing a hat inside, much less in a church, much less on the platform of a church is like mind blowing. It's completely against every common value that they think. Now, people have to understand, we're not sitting here trying to be controversial, trust me, but
yeah, I didn't know we were going in this direction. Of
course you didn't.
But we're here.
We're here.
So
how we roll.
This is Darren, so this is what Darren does, and so we've had that conversation a few times. People have to understand culture changes greatly every generation. And what was acceptable in the 90s, in the 70s, in the 50s, and so forth and so on is different now. And for instance, if you went to a baseball game in the 60s and early 70s and all the way back, if you went with your father to a ball game, a professional ball game, if you went to a Cardinal game, St. Louis Cardinals, we're here in Missouri, and if you went up to the St. Louis Cardinals to watch Cardinals play, you wore a suit and tie. And that was what was common for everybody to wear to a baseball game up until like 1968, even into the early 70s, kind of depending on who you were. But now, literally no one goes to a ball game. The owner of the team doesn't wear a suit, much less the fans. And so times change. And we're a lot of the things that we're alienating people for are for cultural changes, and that cannot, because we can have the greatest thing in the world to offer, and we do. It's called Jesus, right? That is the greatest thing out there. The greatest gift we can give anybody is the gift of Christ, the message of Jesus, the message of the gospel. But if they won't listen to it because we are predisposed to alienate them because of how they dress, what they wear, how they look, what they say, their lingo, any of those things. I mean, we're literally taking away the very thing that we're called and told to give. And so you have the greatest gift in the world, but nobody's going to receive it if you don't allow them to receive it. Yeah. And we don't. That's been the history of the church for a really long time. And because I saw it when I was an atheist, and when I'd go to church, when I was in my mid-20s more, because I wore do-rags and had like 8 earrings back in 1987. And so
you ever think about bringing that look back?
You should. It's not happening. And
wear that on the platform.
That would go over well. And so it was, you got weird looks when you walked anywhere like that. And so I get it on some level. Should we normalize abnormal behavior? What's abnormal?
Yeah.
Well, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, it seems like it's just we have to differentiate because, like you said, the going from like all dolled up and your vest and your tie, coming to a baseball game, and now you're wearing cargo shorts and the team's shirt. But like, I know there's just a weird association by the culture changing, that means also that somehow the truth is changing, and it's like, well, no, that doesn't change, and that's the thing we have to differentiate. Is like, okay, we'll start, don't give the person with the dreadlocks the odd eyes but I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Like somehow when people get worried about that change, they assume that just because we're allowing this, that means like all of a sudden, like we're saying, oh, there's no hell. Yep. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, just be able to find that fine line where like, we accept this because this is just a culture change, but we will never accept the whole, any kind of, that weird out stuff that changes who Jesus is and his role and his importance and everything.
Yeah, one thing that I say to our young adults all the time at 4-1, and I hope that by now all of them know this in their hearts and understand it, is that I am always going to tell you the truth about Jesus. I am always going to give you the word. I am always we're not going to shy away from calling a sin. We're not going to shy away from the truth. We're not going to shy away from hard topics or tough things to talk about. But I am going to accept you for where you're at right now and who you are right now. We're going to talk about if there's things in your life that need to change, if there's things in your life that are holding you back from Jesus, regardless of what those are. We're going to be honest about them. We're going to be upfront about them. I'm going to love you through it all, and we're going to try our best to help you get better. But I'm not gonna shy away from what the truth is ever. And I don't want any of our young adults to ever do that. I want you to understand who Jesus is, what the word says, and why and how it applies to your life. But inside of that, I'm not going to treat you any differently or love you any less depending on where you're at in your life. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, the young people today are influenced, have greater outside influences than we ever could imagine. I mean, you're quite a bit younger than me. You're younger than me by quite a bit as well. And there has been this major shift in communication. Oh, hush. They're calling me. You're looking at me.
I wasn't going to say anything.
All right. You guys are all 20 years younger plus than me. We get it. But
you look good, though.
There was a time where 20 years and difference in age didn't mean things were drastically different for you. Now it's amazing simply because of the change in the way things communicated and the way people attain and acquire information. Whenever I was your age and a little bit before, when I was the age of the folks you guys were talking about, the 18 to 30-year-olds, I mean, we had the internet on some level. I mean, very limited. It was terribly slow. It wasn't even worth trying really. And so pretty much everything that you learned, there was peer pressure, but it was literally like one-on-one peer pressure. It was whatever you had in your school, whatever you had, whatever, if you went to college, and those influences were there. But by and large, you didn't have that major obstacle. And see, the church has a more difficult time today than we did even 30 years ago reaching this age group, because not only do you have the kids that go to college and are taught different ideologies, but back in my time, most of the guys that fell away from God just, they got busy with life, got married, got a job, had babies, and they you didn't see them come back till their babies got a little bit, in children ministry age. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they showed back up at church at like 35 years old with 3 kids. That's how it worked. And, but today is this thing with the internet, and the communication gap is so large and between older people and younger people. But the thing I'm really getting at is you're talking about truth. What is truth now? We know the truth, right? Yeah. But with the internet the way it is, with information availability the way it is, you've heard me say this before, it's theology a la carte. People just kind of pick and choose what they want. And there's so much access, they can just reach into the universe and grab out multiverse and grab out whatever ideas they want and kind of build their own little faith. Yeah. And it's really hard to communicate with those people because there are so many supportive resources that will align with what they've came up with. And so the difficulty of reaching that age group has become exponentially more difficult in the last 5 to 10 years. Yeah.
And I think kind of off of what you just said, I think part of that comes from like their willingness to reach in and grab something to latch onto comes from the fact that there's this misconception that I hear a lot that, if I'm being honest, is not my favorite thing to hear. It gets me kind of upset that people think that young people are just by nature lazy or uninspired, or they don't care and they're completely apathetic. And I think that what it is that it's not that they're lazy or apathetic. It's that they are not going to attach their passion to something that they don't feel is worthwhile. But once they find something that they're passionate about, they're all in on it.
All in, yep.
All in. And like I said earlier, they're looking for a place to belong. They're looking for a place to connect to. So when they find something that they feel like they connect to, they are all in and passionate about it. And it's very hard to change their minds once they get there. And that's why it's important for us as the church to make sure they get a solid, biblical, truth-filled foundation to latch onto. Because if not, they'll go latch onto something that is not the truth, but they're going to latch onto it 1,000%. Yeah. I see it in my young adults now. I love sitting back and I tell them this all the time. I'm so proud of the young adults in this church. When I see the light bulb go off, when I see the moment happen where it's like, oh, okay, they're starting to get it. They're starting to figure this out, because I see that passion ignite, and there's nothing as a pastor that makes me happier. There's nothing that gets me out of bed in the morning. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like seeing that light bulb go off in their eyes where they're like, oh, this is real. This is for real, because then they start getting hungry. They start getting passionate. They start coming to me looking for like, how can I serve? What can I do in the church? What can I do to help? Like I see that stuff happen, and man, it is so incredible to watch. as a pastor and as someone who humbly gets to be like a part of their lives, but it's also why it like bothers me when I hear people say, "Oh, young people don't care." Young people, but no, because I'm looking in the eyes of young people that care every single week. So you can't tell me that that's not the case. You know.
Well, it should excite more than just you, because technically, I mean, that is the call of the church is to prepare this thing we call church, or this Christian walk, for that next generation.
Yeah.
But it's like we've selfishly just kind of kept it to ourselves and have like. Because I know, speaking as a Gen Xer or for the Boomers, we have really let that generation down, in my opinion. I always thought that and always felt that. And the issue with that is like, again, we want that is the generation that's going to be the future leaders of this church. Now, I will say that. If we use since we are a church and we are pastors, we can use the Bible every once in a while. There's the story of Elijah and Elisha, and the whole idea. And we talk about mentoring and helping the next generation out for various reasons. It's biblical, Timothy with Paul, so forth and so on. But I think there is a misconception. There is with us old folks. We need to allow the young people to infiltrate to the various levels of your church. So in leadership, in all the various different departments, ministries, whatever you want to call them, and they need to have an input. They need to have a voice on some level. They had to earn that. That's what I was kind of getting at, because I think a lot of what young people need to understand as well is that with Elijah and Elisha, Elijah was doing his thing, all right, and he was doing what God called him. Elisha could have quit at any point, all right. I mean, he was there, but at any point, he had many reasons why he could have went and walked away, but he didn't. He continued to follow, in this case, the man of God, Elijah, and so it's not gonna be easy. I mean, it takes some will on the side of young people, but at the same time, we can't be throwing up obstacles, and that's what I've seen. Ever since I became a Christian, is I mostly see obstacles for young people to come to the fullness of the knowledge of Christ. Because you rarely see a church that is open arms about placing a 23-year-old in the position of leadership over a large volunteer team. It just doesn't happen very often. Almost always it'll be somebody at minimum in their mid to late 30s on into their 50s and 60s, which that's fine as well. It just, to me, it's all about placing that right person. But if those people do not have an opportunity, if you do not raise up that generation, if you are not pouring into that generation, if you do not consider that generation, if you don't ever communicate to that generation in a manner that is common to them, they're going to tune you out. Yeah. And it seems like we're kind of paying the cost of that right now. The church is not completely at fault for everything. The world is what the world is. The world's influence is what the world's influence is. But we have a heavy debt, and to me, and I think what in all of that, it's like churches kind of have their own audience. Every church has an audience, and what I mean by that is it's like they're geared towards reaching some grouping of the population. I've never met a church, even though they may not define who they're going after. By and large, every church, you can go to a church on one side of town and they got one group kind of people. You can go to church on this part of town or out in the country, and it's pretty much the same type of people.
Yeah.
There's never been a church that I know of that their focus was 18 to 29, 30 years old. I've never seen one. And guess what? If you don't pay attention to a whole grouping of people, they don't care about you.
Right.
And so it's unfortunate, but I think that's kind of where we are in this generation, in this era of the church.
No, you're right, and I think that's why a lot of young people aren't walking in their calling today.
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
And as a church, we should be focused on helping those individuals walk in their calling, which is really the entire heart behind 4-1. That's why it's called 4-1. If you don't know why that name is there, it's based out of Ephesians 4:1, where Paul urges to live a life that is worthy of your calling. And so our whole goal, everything that we do, the whole focal point of this ministry is to help young people identify their calling, identify the call of God on their life. What am I here for? What is my purpose? And then helping them walk that calling out, because you can tell a person that they have a calling all day. You can tell a person God's got a plan for their life all day. And like that may be true, but if they leave and they don't understand what that means, if they don't understand how to walk that calling out, then you've really just given them information with no direction, nowhere to go. And so we're here to help them kind of find that direction in their life and find those things they need to do to walk that path and get closer to God and live out that purpose that He has for them.
No, that's 100% correct. No, that's really, yeah. And we know truth is, as you were talking earlier, is a fading thing. Whenever you're speaking to people, 'cause I've learned this, I think a lot of people also think that they don't want to ask the hard questions or the deep questions. And I've found that's completely untrue. I think a lot of times we pacify them with simplicity, because to be honest, a lot of them don't have a faith and they don't have the foundation. So we do need to build that foundation, but their questions are rarely ever, never, ever foundational.
Yeah.
And we always have to bring them back to that. But the questions we always ask are the deepest, most philosophical things you can think about. And so we have to learn, and I know Michael does it really well, and we, the church, have to learn that they're always going to start out with these really deep moral questions and want to know how we feel about it. So we have to somehow or another teach these things at the same time, lay foundation.
Yeah.
And that's a very difficult thing to do. And
It's,
to be honest,
it's a balance to find.
And to be honest, the entire church at this point in time in history, we're pretty biblically illiterate. And so even the church by and large, most people know very little about the Bible. And so we make that same, we have that same balance to make in the main church, but to me, it's even more pronounced with young people, because they've asked me some really cool questions. I love when they ask questions that nobody normally doesn't ask, and so I enjoy those things as a person who, like me, I like answering those questions. But and they know, because they had some real controversial things they want to ask, and we won't allow them to ask those questions. We won't allow them to ask questions about homosexuality, about gender, the gender differences out there, about any of these, abortion. We just kind of go, we either like harp on them politically, or we don't talk about them. We ain't gonna touch it. We don't want to talk about anything. But people have those questions. That's the things they're being asked about in school and college. That's what the internet is telling them. One of the things they're learning on the internet is we are narrow and have we're an old school philosophy from an ancient book, from an ancient culture that has no relevancy in this era. And so it's a very difficult age group to reach. And that's 100% why you're brought on board, because I'm glad somebody's gifted to it.
It's difficult. Using your word, you say it's difficult, and I think the difficulty comes from we have been conditioned in church for a long time, and again, I'm just going to be honest.
Yep.
We have been conditioned to just put Band-Aids on stuff.
Oh yeah.
We've just been conditioned to have a Band-Aid theology. Just pray about it.
Yep.
Just
that's usually our answer. We'll be praying about it.
And don't get me wrong,
praying for your brother.
I understand the power of prayer. That is not my point here. I'm not saying that that's not important, but I think you guys all know there's some situations, there's some topics in church that people try to shy away from. They don't want to talk about it. Young people need to talk about those topics, and if you just try to give them a Band-Aid, they will walk away, because that's not what they're looking for. Yeah,
just because the Bible says so, or you got to have faith, aren't good answers. I'm just letting you know now.
It's not going to work for them anymore, and where they're at. They want to know the truth behind it. They want to know the context. They want to know why this is what it is.
And the reason is because they have the ability to go into online and learn these things from untrustful people, from untrustful opinions and resources. So if you're not going to tell them, if we don't tell them, they're going to learn. They're going to find out an answer. And if that answer is not coming from a very biblical, very sound from a backing or resource, then it's coming from who knows where.
Right.
And that's where we're running into, is the fact we're seeing people have all these insane belief systems about various things simply because we are afraid to tell them the truth. Now, the truth is biblical. They may not like the answer. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody said we had to tickle their ear, as the Bible says. We don't have to give them the answers they want. We just need to have an answer. We need to be able to answer questions that they are truly interested in knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if we shy away from that, it's going to do more harm than good. I think a lot of times we think that we're doing the right thing. We think it's well intentioned when we tell someone, just pray about it.
Yep.
It's well intentioned when we tell somebody, you just gotta have faith. And listen, I understand that at a certain degree, you do just have to have faith. and I tell our young adults this. Yep. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm like, listen. Like I will answer as many questions and I will be there for you as much as I can. But there is a certain point where you have to understand that you're just not going to understand everything there is about God. I can't do that for you. None of our pastors on staff can do that for you. But there's a difference between letting someone know, like, hey, at some point you got to let this take over, and just using that as a Band-Aid or a crutch or a placeholder for I don't really know the answer to this.
But that answer only works if they have a relationship with you.
Correct.
So that's been the issue with the church, is the church hasn't had a relationship with young people. And so that answer works after you've already attempted and proven your authenticity and your willingness to listen and to help and to answer all the questions you possibly could. And they know that if you had the answer, if there was within your ability to answer this question, that you would. But sometimes you're right. I've had to get the same. And I consider myself somewhat learned, but regardless, I love that word, learned.
Learned.
Yeah. But regardless how well-read, well-versed, anything you are, Pastor Chris, nobody has all the answers. And so sometimes it is a matter simply of, dude, you're just going to have to pray and trust the Lord.
Yep.
But I can't have that conversation with somebody who doesn't trust me.
Right.
Because, I'm just a face, a dude, a thing, some old guy going, dude, you're just giving me you're giving me a run around. I know what you're doing.
Which is another one of the points behind 4-1 is it is about building relationship with that age group, because as much as they're looking for the truth and they're looking for something they can feel like they belong to, they're also looking for community. They're looking for people that care about them. I mean, this age group deals with, and there's a lot of statistics out there you can look up. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of depression. The suicide rates are wild. I mean, you hear about it in the news all the time.
Yep.
Somebody who, and the reactions are always for the most part, seem very similar. Like, oh, we would have never guessed, or we would have never known. But it comes from a lot of times these feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, and nobody cares, and nobody would miss me, and like all of these things. And so knowing that, we want to provide a place where not only can they find their calling, which is our ultimate goal, but we also want to provide a safe place for them to make friendships, build good, godly friendships and relationships, because how important is that to your development as a Christian? How important is that? Like, if you don't have good, solid, godly influences around you, it's going to be really hard to make it. You need good friendships, good influences, people that are going to encourage you, people that are going to walk this path with you. And so we're very passionate about just doing things to kind of build those relationships, having fun, like doing things that did you know you could have fun in church?
What?
You can be a Christian and have fun?
It's crazy.
No.
So a lot of our young adults are figuring that out, and so just doing stuff to have some fun and build relationship and put people in a place where they can have that community and that camaraderie, and also just finding mentors. Man, mentorship is so important. That's something that we're very passionate about, is, you find somebody who is where you want to be, who is, a little bit further down the road than you, and you get around them and build a relationship with them and try to figure out, like, how do I get from here to there? You know what I'm saying? Not that obviously you don't put anybody on a pedestal, but it's right. It's important to have people that are reaching the goals that you want to reach in life.
Well, Paul talks about that.
Yeah.
He said, model this after what I've done. And he never claimed to be perfect, but
Correct.
He said, hey, at the very least, model after me. The ultimate model, of course, is that person who's the mentor is pointing them toward Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And I know we're getting ready to shut this thing down. And we'll let Zach close it out here in just a moment, but he didn't know he was closing out. But since he opened, he might as well close it out. But I will say,
continuity.
What you were saying earlier rings true. We should all be excited. I'm excited about what's going to happen with 4-1 here in Connection Point Church. I'm excited about where the future will be. I'm excited about seeing the future leaders that come up through 4-1 and to see how that impacts our culture here and hopefully beyond here. And it's just as important as it is, I said earlier, for your Elishas to make themselves available to the Elijah. You just kind of brought up a good point. Paul sought out his Timothy. We have to have, every one of you should be mentoring. If you're a Christian, every one of us in this room, we should have people we're mentoring on some level. There should be a little Michael running around and a little Zach and a little Darren. Nobody wants that. But the goal is for us all to raise up our Timothys, right? And we have to seek those out. Jesus went and sought disciples. They didn't come to him. He sought the disciples. He went and found the disciples. Paul went and found his disciples. And so that is our jobs as seasoned Christians. And so if you think we're sitting here telling you because we're sitting here talking about young people and how great young people are and can be in the Lord and how old people have messed this all up, hope you don't take that at all that way, because you have the greater job. You guys have the job of being the ones who mentor these thousands upon thousands of young people out there just in this community alone. And you are the ones they're going to turn to. You're the ones I hope they turn to. I hope they're turning to our seasoned Christians looking for answers. And I hope our seasoned Christians in our church and just at large as a Christian, I hope you are open to trying to help those guys and mentor those guys. Again, that doesn't mean you just tell them they're great and perfect and you can do anything you want, Sparky. That isn't what that means at all.
And don't call anyone Sparky.
I won't.
You say Chief.
Chief.
Yeah, Chief. Yeah, Chief. But yeah, dude, I'm real excited about everything going on with Pastor Michael's ministry. Sorry, I just called you.
That was new.
It just came. This is live, folks. Sort of. It's live recorded. So, anyways, but yeah, we're real excited about what's going to be coming down. Through the 4-1 ministry, and dude, it's a pleasure to do ministry with you, and I can't wait to be serving with a bunch of with a group of young people. It's gonna be exciting.
Yeah, we're excited. So yeah, January 15th is our official launch, and then after that, we'll be every Sunday night at 7 p.m. at CPC. So if you're a young adult in the area, 18 to 30, come check us out. Come hang out with us.
Yeah, so with that, I hope that was informative to you. Just a reminder that basically what we said is it is the church, as the seasoned Christians, to be the ones reaching out to the younger generation. So it is frankly, it's a lofty job.
It is.
And so as I said, this wasn't an accusatory message. It's really meant to inspire you that, like, as us who've been Christians for a while, to reach out. But at the same time, it's the job for those young people to seek as well, because it's not just like you said, it's not we're just there to pat them on the back. It's them to grow and follow as well. Because Elijah did not just pull on Elisha. Elisha had to follow him. So it's a two-way street there.
It is,
for sure.
So anyway, well, with that, we'll wrap our Life on Point podcast here, and we will see you next time.
We did a proverbial wave. We suck.